The coronavirus budget. What will the new Chancellor announce to help the economy through this health crisis? And what other big measures will make the cut? Rishi Sunak already had a tough job, delivering his first budget just 4 weeks after he became Chancellor. Now he's having to do it in the middle of the UK's coronavirus crisis. This morning, the Bank of England cut interest rates, the first emergency measure to help the economy during the outbreak. Late last night, the first MP, Health Minister Nadine Dorries, confirmed she had tested positive. The Chancellor is right now inside the Commons and says his budget will make the UK one of the best-placed economies in the world to manage the potential impact of the virus. We'll hear that speech in just half an hour's time and get reaction to it from our team of editors here in the studio. The most important budget, according to the Shadow Chancellor, since the Second World War.
And what will the budget do for the people of Lee in Greater Manchester? Our panel reflects this area, which has just turned Tory after almost 100 years as a Labour stronghold. But can the Chancellor deliver on promises made to areas like this?
This is the ITV News Budget Special with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon and welcome to an ITV News Special, the Chancellor's budget. It is the first budget in more than 17 months, a first for this government since winning a big majority in the snap election. A first for the new Chancellor less than a month into the second biggest job in politics. But it's not the budget the government was planning to deliver. That's because of the coronavirus outbreak. Expect some new announcements on that and some big announcements that could change your finances and the country's over the next 5 years. Westminster is right now at the very heart of the COVID-19 story as the news broke late last night that the Health Minister Nadine Dorries had tested positive herself. Emergency action to help the economy through this health crisis came first thing this morning as the Bank of England cut interest rates. Prime Minister's questions will surely focus on that. It has just begun. The budget follows. We'll bring you the Chancellor's speech live as soon as it begins. And we'll get reaction in the studio and from around the country from our team of editors. But first to our political correspondent Carl Dinnan with the latest on the coronavirus budget.
Not only has Rishi Sunak never delivered a budget before, a month ago he didn't know he'd be Chancellor. Now he's about to deliver a game-changing budget amidst a global health crisis which has rendered economic forecasts irrelevant. So what's in the box is even more interesting than usual. Just before leaving Downing Street, he had met the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, to discuss their coordinated response to coronavirus. Earlier, the Governor had announced that the bank's Monetary Policy Committee was knocking 0.5% off interest rates to make loans and mortgages cheaper.
The MPC is reducing bank rate by 0.5% to 0.25%. This action will help support net cash flows of borrowers during a period in which economic activity is likely to be disrupted. The reduction in bank rate will help to support confidence at a difficult time to bolster the cash flows of businesses and households.
Having seen interest rates slashed to a historic low of 0.25%, it's now the Chancellor's turn to take action. He may choose to offer financial protection for the self-employed who have to self-isolate. He could offer tax breaks for business, cutting or deferring VAT, rates or national insurance. And there will have to be emergency money for the NHS.
The challenge here is that they need something that is workable, that is reasonably well targeted, but can be implemented quickly. There's no good having the perfect system that is implemented in October, November, because by that point, we assume that the crisis will have passed.
Before that, it will get closer to all of us. This morning's cabinet meeting went ahead despite news that the Health Minister, Nadine Dorries, had tested positive for coronavirus.
Is it safe to go in there, Secretary of State?
She had attended a reception with the Prime Minister in Number 10 last week, although was not in close contact with him, so he is not being tested for the virus.
No stone?
Ms Dorries said she had isolated herself as soon as she was diagnosed, tweeting last night, "Thanks for so many good wishes. It's been pretty rubbish, but I hope I'm over the worst of it now. More worried about my 84-year-old mum who's staying with me and began with the cough today."
Morning, Minister.
Even were it not for coronavirus, this would be a significant budget. The Chancellor is expected to announce a large increase in spending on roads, rail and other infrastructure, some of which the opposition welcomes.
We wanted very big investments in transport, but also in the climate emergency. We had big plans for the expansion of offshore wind, for energy efficiency in people's homes. So the test for me, for the government and for the Chancellor is, what does he want to spend that money on? What is the real impact on people's lives?
So Rishi Sunak, the rookie Chancellor, faces two enormous challenges in the budget he is about to deliver: protecting the nation and the economy from coronavirus and preparing its infrastructure for the longer-term future. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
Ben Chapman is in Shefford in mid-Bedfordshire, the constituency of Nadine Dorries. The Minister, as we've just been hearing, is understandably in isolation right now, Ben.
Yeah, we're told she is recovering in self-isolation at home. In her tweet last night, she said her 84-year-old mother, who's staying with her and had developed a cough, was being tested for the virus today. Meanwhile, the work to try and track down all of the people that Nadine Dorries has come into close contact with over the last few days is underway. We understand she held a constituency surgery, met constituents on Friday. That was held at the Flitwick Conservative Club about 10 miles from here, and that building is now being deep cleaned. Now, we know she first started showing symptoms on Thursday. That was the day she attended an event in Downing Street. Also in attendance was the Prime Minister. On the same day, she had a meeting with a Labour MP, Rachel Maskell. Now, she has taken the decision to self-isolate, she says, after receiving advice from NHS 111. Now, she told us she's fine. She doesn't have any symptoms at the moment, but she urged everyone to follow the medical advice, including the Prime Minister, who was at that event with Nadine Dorries on Thursday.
There's nothing special about the Prime Minister. He's another human being who should be acting according to the advice of Public Health England as well. And therefore, I advise him, as I would anybody, is to contact NHS 111. And if they say self-isolate, he absolutely must follow that advice.
Well, the Department of Health says there are no plans at the moment to test ministers, including the Prime Minister, for the virus following Nadine Dorries' diagnosis. Public Health England says it has assessed the risk and only those who have been in close contact with her or with symptoms need to self-isolate. But clearly the work to find those who have been in close contact with her is going to be very important now.
All right, Ben Chapman, thank you very much. Let's join our political editor, Robert Peston, now in the Houses of Parliament. The coronavirus outbreak at the heart of government today. Some calls for Parliament itself to be shut down. How concerned are officials?
Extremely concerned. Let's be absolutely clear. The priority of every part of government at the moment is to delay the spread of coronavirus to a period when the NHS is able to cope. Literally, the thrust of everything that's going on is to prevent an explosive outbreak anytime soon because capacity in hospitals is so low. So, pretty much everything that you're seeing and hearing at the moment is aimed at that emergency effort.
Robert, this wasn't the budget that we're expecting, that the government was planning for. How much impact will the outbreak have on the government's big plans for the future?
So, look, half of this budget is precisely what the government has been planning. 100 billion quid of additional spending on infrastructure, some tax changes, some national insurance changes, increasing the rate at which, for example, we all pay national insurance. That is the stuff that the government promised in its manifesto, and that is what will be delivered today. But the bit that we're all going to be looking at are the emergency measures to protect the economy from a downturn that looks utterly inevitable as a result of the expected coronavirus outbreak. We saw dramatic action by the Bank of England first thing this morning, a half percentage point cut in interest rates and a £100 billion lending scheme to provide emergency lending to businesses to businesses that get into trouble if their staff can't turn up for work or demand for their services collapses and, they simply incur significant losses. However, the Bank of England cannot soften the contraction, the squeeze on the economy on its own. Rishi Sunak is going to have to take some important measures. We just heard from the Prime Minister in the House of Commons that the budget would contain measures to make sure that anybody who does the right thing and stays home rather than working because they fear they have the virus or they have to look after a sick person, he said none of those people would pay a financial price. So what we will be waiting for, the big thing in the budget, is how will Sunak reassure people that they will not fall into hardship if they can't work? Important measures expected.
Thank you very much. Just behind Robert, let's take you to the House of Commons. MPs are questioning Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, right now. Let's have a listen in.
Meet with me and other colleagues with rural farming constituencies to discuss how to support farmers and growers in trade deals to provide them with more opportunity to produce even more food under high animal and environmental welfare.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. We will not compromise on animal welfare. We will not compromise on food standards and hygiene. I'm only too happy.
OK, well, we'll leave Prime Minister's questions there for now, right now, to get some reaction to what we may be seeing in the next hour or so in the studio. I'm joined by our national editor, Allegra Stratton, Joel Hills, our business editor, and Tom Clark, our science editor, who will be giving you their analysis after we hear from the Chancellor a little later. First of all, if you can just, I know we're in this very unpredictable time and the government's had to do a rewrite on this budget. What big things are you still expecting, Allegra?
Well, it's essentially two budgets, isn't it? And they couldn't be more different. And both of them couldn't be larger. One is an emergency budget, a reaction to a biological problem, a threat that politicians are not normally used to dealing with. The other is a long-term, huge political and economic job, which is levelling up. We'll hear, I think, probably levelling up so much in this budget statement that it will probably try all of our patiences. But this is the attempt for those new voters who you heard from talking to Chris Choi earlier, those new once Labour voters, to reassure them and to give them what they need within 4 years. That's the time of the next election, and that's the time that everybody inside government believes they have to have delivered by to have materially changed their lives, these new voters' lives. And many people don't think they can do it. Many people think the job they have to do is a decade long. And so that's why the Chancellor today, for all he would like to talk about the immediate biological, incredibly serious threat, also has to get the ball rolling in these other ways.
Yeah, Joel, no pressure on the new Chancellor dealing with these two big things, the problems for the future, long-standing problems, and this immediate crisis right now.
Yeah, and already something very significant has happened this morning. That unscheduled interest rate cuts are extremely rare. The last time one happened was in October 2008, when, of course, the British economy was heading straight into recession as a result of the financial crisis. So the action the Bank of England has taken this morning was deliberately coordinated to coincide with the Chancellor's budget. It's designed to reassure, it's designed to be significant, to substantial, compelling, to offer some sort of reassurance to households, to businesses, that the Bank of England and the government will do all it can to keep businesses in business and keep people in work. We're in the foothills, Nina, very clearly, of an economic shock of unknowable scale, but one that has the potential to cause an awful lot of damage. Now, Mark Carney this morning said he thought that this will be short, sharp, and should be temporary, and this is what the mitigation factor is all about. I mean, it's interesting, the cut to base rate of 0.5% won't actually have the impact that many people would imagine, I suspect, because there are around 5.7 million people who have fixed rate mortgages. It's not going to confer any benefit to them. There are 2.2 households who have variable rate and tracker rate mortgages. They will save up to £30 a month. Well, that's not nothing. But it's not awe-inspiring, really. I mean, I think the more substantial measures have been the more technical and the more complicated ones that Robert referred to earlier about the term funding scheme that was first sort of dusted off in a various form during the financial crisis. It's all about incentivising banks to lend to people that need it, to keep the financial system operating, to make sure that money is cheap and plentiful and easy as it can be to borrow. The market reaction, I mean, in totality, actually, the Bank of England was saying it thinks it might create up to £300 billion of lending. I mean, total UK corporates didn't borrow anything like that last year. So this is extremely substantial. The market reaction, positive, but very muted. The FTSE's only just in positive territory.
We'll get into a little more of that detail in just a few minutes. Tom, in terms of this coronavirus element of the budget, what are you hearing? What are you expecting?
Well, as Joel made clear there, and Robert as well, these are things that have to be switched on and switched off quite quickly. They have to be things that don't require a lot of new systems setting up. But the gamble the government's taking is they don't know how long coronavirus is going to be around for. The best estimates are a peak sometime this spring, trailing off hopefully before the winter crisis hits the NHS in the winter. But that is an assumption. It's probably the most reasonable one at the moment, but we just don't know how long. So that's one thing they have to factor in. But it's important, I think, what we know is anxiety about the coronavirus could be as damaging as the virus itself. The government has got a huge job here to reassure the worried well, and remember, most of us are going to remain well throughout this outbreak, a bit snuffly, but we'll get through it, that the economy is going to be okay. So it's doing two things. It's partly practical, preparing the NHS, preparing society, but it's also reassuring everyone it's going to be okay.
OK, Tom, thanks for your initial thoughts on Joel and Allegra as well. A reminder that you are watching an ITV News special, The Chancellor's Budget. We're expecting the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, to begin his speech in the next 10 minutes or so. So, what might the budget mean for all of us? Our consumer editor, Chris Choi, is in Lee in Greater Manchester, a place that had been a Labour stronghold for nearly 100 years, but the seat was snatched back in a shock win by the Conservative James Grundy at the last election in December. People there had been feeling neglected by the government, so they're hoping this budget delivers for them. Chris, what do you think they'll make of it?
Well, we still can't be sure what's in the budget, but we can be pretty sure that in the Chancellor's mind are places like this, people like we have here. Sue Cottam, you might be on the Chancellor's mind right now. You run a jewellery business in the shopping centre. It looks busy now, but you're concerned about the impacts of coronavirus. What do you want him to do today specifically?
Well, he needs to pump some money back into the small towns like Lee, regenerate them, fill some of the empty shops.
How can he do that?
Reduce business rates for existing businesses, maybe give new businesses some kind of incentive, by giving them maybe the first year free, or, reduce the cost of parking. Wigan at the minute have got a free parking scheme at the weekends and during the week after 3. Maybe extend that so that it brings more shoppers into the town. OK,
well, Steve Hill, you run a local factory. What's the bigger picture here? Yours is a bigger business. It has clients including the aviation industry. What can you do to support you during this really tough time?
Well, yeah, I mean, would have been talking this a week or so ago, would have been talking about Brexit and trade deals and stuff. Well, yeah, the bigger picture is we need to make good on this promise for this to levelling, as he called it. With HS2 is a step in the right direction.
And business rates,
business rates, you've got to freeze business rates for smaller businesses in this coronavirus crisis.
Karen Collins is also with us. Thanks for joining us. Mother of 3, and also you help providing school uniforms to needy families. We hear this phrase, levelling up. What will it take to level up Lee?
It'll take some real work on the benefit system. Universal credit is just dreadful, and that's causing massive inequalities in our society, to the point where businesses like us, small businesses, are having to do this type of social enterprise, giving back to the community to support families that can't afford food, never mind uniform or clothes for children. That's a dreadful position to be in this day and age.
Georgina Ward is alongside you. Georgina, you are a final year student. You're still living at home with your folks. That means you've got an eye very much on prospects in the housing market.
Definitely, yeah.
There's this talk about more affordable homes.
Yeah, affordable housing for young people would be great.
But you're suspicious of the term even, aren't you?
Yes, definitely. And obviously, as a university student, the university fees at the moment are so high, and then having to pay that back as you become a postgraduate, yeah, it's very difficult for young students.
What can you do then to help you?
Reduce the cost of housing for first-time buyers, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All kinds of mechanisms you might use for that. Alan Wright recently retired. you have a car, but you're also very concerned about public transport.
Well, yeah,
you need to see some infrastructure improvements in this area.
That's right. I would love to see Lee with the train station back in the area, and would hope that the Chancellor will bring the HS2 forward and let's get it done, get rid of this north-south divide. But on the coronavirus thing, me as a pensioner is in the vulnerable group, yet I'm only vulnerable to a certain point where I still have to go to work till I'm 67, and other people, the Welshby women for one instance, have to go till they're 66.
OK, Alan, well, they're a tough bunch to please. Also with us is a tax expert from EY Accountancy, doing all the number crunching to guide us through what goes on in this budget. When the Chancellor stops his speech, join us for some of the first public reaction to what's been said.
Could we not? Chris, thank you very much. In Lee for now, thank you. Allegra, let's focus on this awful phrase, really, of levelling up, that this is the government's promise to voters who would traditionally vote Labour, who lent their vote or gave their vote to the Tories in the SAP election. If this is a big part of this budget, given the context of the coronavirus outbreak and the measures there, how long will it take for people to see the benefits of any investment that the government is putting in those areas?
I think it's going to take quite a while. I think even we're going to hear a lot about infrastructure from Rishi Sunak shortly. We know in this country we don't have a great track record of getting those huge infrastructure projects done quickly, on time, that it is another election in 4 years' time. And so if you've got people, the government saying, look, we are helping you with trains and so on in your area, it's good, but is it going to be transformative? One of the key things that I think the Chancellor will announce is this review of the Green Book. Essentially, in a nutshell, that is, do Treasury rules right now allow us to do the kind of investment we're going to need to in order to transform these communities? Is it right that we can only borrow to invest, to pour money into infrastructure? Should we, for instance, say that if we put more money into teacher salaries, that actually might have a greater impact on some of these communities? Because if you look at London and you look at our levels of educated workforce, it's very high, and that's partly why investment swills around in Greater London. Some of these areas need huge amounts of help to boost skills and to boost the local workforce to be able to attract businesses to the area. So it's very complicated, and most people agree this is a generational change, and it's an important one, and it's the right, I think, political project, having been to these constituencies so many times. I mean, I talked to a Tory MP the other day, Paul Maynard, who is in Blackpool, one of the most deprived constituencies in the country, and he said it's skills. It is skills in schools. The companies don't come here because they can't get the workforce. That doesn't turn around quickly.
OK, we'll discuss the fiscal rules and whether they matter in this particular budget as much as usual in just a minute. But Allegra, thank you for now. In the House of Commons, Boris Johnson is still picking his way through Prime Minister's questions this lunchtime. The Chancellor will be on his feet very shortly, but before he does, we're going to take a quick break. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching an ITV News special, the Chancellor's budget. We are expecting the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, to get to his feet any minute now. We'll go to that as soon as he takes to the floor. Let's bring in our panel of editors before that moment happens. With me, as you know, National Editor Allegra Stratton, Joel Hills, our business editor, and Tom Clark, our science editor. Joel, discussing briefly fiscal rules, the much talked about government's rules for what they can borrow, what percentages and under what terms. Do they matter as much as they normally do right now? Will Rishi Sunak be judged on whether he's stuck to those?
Do you know, that is a really good question, because I think if you speak to the average punter in the dog and duck, they really don't care at all. And I think if you look at the way the city is currently willing to stuff the government's pockets with borrowed money, investors don't really care very much about them either. The chattering classes do, and they will tut if they are ditched or if they are changed. Bear in mind, though, Nina, this is they do have a value. Fiscal rules, the idea about it is that the government ties its own hands. It imposes self-restraint. The idea behind them is to give the reassurance to voters that they will spend wisely and responsibly and won't overstretch. The problem is the instinct of this government is to spend an awful lot of money. And the fiscal rules as they stand restrict the amount of borrowing that can be done. So watch very carefully and see what the new Chancellor does with his predecessor's rules.
OK, the Shadow Chancellor has described this as the most important budget since the Second World War. Others have described needing a wartime Chancellor right now. John McDonnell was talking very much about the impact of the coronavirus outbreak and the impact in general on the NHS. What do you think we might see to address that immediate concern of people?
I think that there will be announcements of new money further to the 20 billion that the NHS has already been promised in the manifesto. I think this, by the way, this budget will be largely about delivering on the Tory manifesto. My worry is, even in the context that we're in right now, they'll tick those manifesto promises. Oh, yeah. This is all about, I think by the end of it, they will say we've committed on manifesto pledges, partly because they know they have this job on levelling up. What can you do in the meantime to prove that you're serious about various things? My understanding is, yes, they will. My concern is, what can you do even with loads of money thrown at the NHS when you have GP shortages, nurse shortages, which, yes, this government is trying to address, but it is not a quick job, and it doesn't. I think there's 43,000 nurse vacancies. So and the idea of the retired GPs coming back, they don't want to do it. And also, by the way, they're not all of them young. By definition, they've retired. So it's very difficult to see, even with contingency funds poured at the NHS, quite what you do with a system that is already, I think we can agree, because of all of the reporting all of us have done from hospitals that say waiting lists at historic highs, a system that is struggling. Because whatever money you pour in, you can't magic these doctors and nurses into the system, especially the point where we're being told a fifth of the workforce, including the NHS, could be off work at the same time if this virus peaks. Absolutely. One note of caution I would put into the mix, which you may disagree with me, I do not underestimate the severity of coronavirus, but I think it is important to look at it as slightly different from the financial crash, and therefore the longevity of some of the hit today and in the next few months is going to be different. With the financial crash, the very lifeblood of the economy and the country was on the knees because the banking system was the problem. That is not the case today, but I do not underestimate that, we have never seen the likes of this. OK, Allegra, we're keeping an eye on the Prime Minister, who's still taking questions in his usual Wednesday Prime Minister's question time before the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, takes to his position to deliver his first budget. I must just say, when we do cross live to the Commons and take the Chancellor's speech, our editors will be tweeting their initial analysis to the speech, so keep an eye out on your screens for their initial reaction to anything and everything that Rishi Sunak announces when that budget speech does begin. Tom, in terms of the impact on this budget of the coronavirus outbreak, what could get knocked out? This could have been a climate change budget, with that being perceived to be the most important crisis we were facing just a few weeks ago.
Widely anticipated, given a legally binding net zero carbon target the government signed up to, that we would have to have big measures for climate change in there. That's across all this infrastructure spending would have to not just be compatible with our changing climate, that's more flooding, more extreme weather, rainfall, temperature, but also not making our carbon emissions worse. If you're going to do road building, they've got to be roads for electric cars rather than for fossil fuel-powered ones. We were expecting a lot of announcements on that. But now, with the coronavirus, I mean, I think it's reasonable to speculate things like fuel duty-frees, which there was rumours might be lifted. That ain't going to happen, certainly right now. So what is going to be in there to mitigate things like that? There better be significant announcements on electrification of vehicles, financial support in some way, or VAT cut for buying a new electric car, things like that. So it was expected to be this, yes, a big climate-facing budget. And also, I think the government's become aware of a couple of new things. Since then, the appeal court's decision on the third runway at Heathrow has reminded them that because there is a legal binding climate change target now, you can't just spend money on infrastructure willy-nilly and not have to face and potentially face legal challenges over it. So they have to be careful in how they move forward, but they can't avoid the realities of climate change.
Joel, this is the first budget of the year. In 2019, we didn't have a budget at all, the longest period between budgets in modern history. Do you think issues like climate change will be discussed in the next budget or in the spending review that are not being
with a sense of urgency, Nina, the UK government has to set out how it's going to get to the target that it set itself. At the moment, the policy decisions are completely vague and the detail needs to be filled in. This is the year that we're hosting, the world will be looking to the UK for leadership later on in the year in COP26. So there's pressure on the government to do precisely that, but there are just more pressing issues.
Joel, I'm going to let you pause there just for a minute because Prime Minister's Questions is over for now. This, one of the most important budgets, as we've been saying in recent years, is set to begin. The Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, has handed over to the Principal Deputy Speaker, Dame Eleanor Lang, there. As is tradition in her role of Chair of Ways and Means, she chairs the budget debate. The first woman to do so, a little bit more history in the making there. It's the biggest of days, though, for one Rishi Sunak. It's only 5 years since he became an MP, only a month in this role, as we were saying earlier. So now this big moment for him in a professional and personal sense, and what he says in the next hour or so will have such an impact on all of us and the nation's finances as well. So let's hand you over to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who is about to begin his first budget speech. Rishi Sunak.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to get straight to the issue most on everyone's mind, coronavirus COVID-19. I know how worried people are, worried about their health, the health of their loved ones, their jobs, their income, their businesses, their financial security. And I know they get even more worried when they turn on their TVs and hear talk of markets collapsing and difficult times coming. People want to know what is happening and what can be done to fix it. What everyone needs to know is that we are doing everything we can to keep this country and our people healthy and financially secure. Yeah. We are clear that this is an issue above party. We will do right by you and your family, and I know I will have the support of the whole House as I say that. This House has always stood ready to come together, put aside party politics, and act in the national interest. We have done so before, and I know we will do so again. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, alongside officials and scientists, is leading the work on the public health response. Today, I want to set out our economic response, so we bring stability and security. Let me say this: we will get through this together. The British people may be worried, but they are not daunted. We will protect our country and our people. We will rise to this challenge. But let me also say, yes, this virus is the key challenge facing our country today, but it is not the only challenge. We have just had an election where people voted for change. Change in our economy, change in our public services, change in the cost of living, change in our economic geography. This budget delivers on that change. Yes, as we deal with coronavirus, it is a budget that provides for security today, but it is also a plan for prosperity tomorrow. It is a budget that delivers on our promises to the British people. It is the budget of a government that gets things done. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I set out the details of our plan, let me first thank members who've contributed to the discussions on how to respond to coronavirus. Members from both sides of this House. Our economy is robust, our public finances are sound, our public services are well prepared. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is working around the clock to protect the public's health. And I will do whatever it takes to support the economy. First, let me explain the nature of the economic challenge and my overall strategy. The challenge is this: there is likely to be a temporary disruption to our economy. On the supply side, up to a fifth of the working-age population could need to be off work at any one time. And business supply chains are being disrupted around the globe. This combination of people being unable to work and businesses being unable to access goods will mean that for a period, our productive capacity will shrink. There will also be an impact on the demand side of the economy through a reduction in consumer spending. The combination of those effects will have a significant impact on the UK economy, but it will be temporary. People will return to work. Supply chains will return to normal. Life will return to normal. For a period, it's going to be tough, but I'm confident that our economic performance will recover. So given this analysis of the situation, let me set out our strategy to deal with it. We can't avoid a fall in demand because the primary driver of that reduction in consumption, the primary reason that people are not spending as normal, is because they're following doctors' orders to stay at home. So the right immediate policy response is to provide security and support for those who get sick or can't work through funding our public services and a strengthened safety net. And on the supply side, the right response is to provide a bridge for businesses to ensure that what is a temporary impact on our productive capacity does not become permanent. In other words, our response will be temporary, timely, and targeted. This is the right response and at the right time. That response is clearly and closely coordinated with the Bank of England. The Governor and I have been in constant communication about the evolving situation, and our responses have been carefully designed to be complementary and to have maximum impact, consistent with our independent responsibilities. The Governor set out this morning the actions that the Bank will take to help UK businesses and households bridge across the likely economic disruption. A 50 basis point reduction to interest rates to support business and consumer confidence and cash flows. The introduction of an SME term funding scheme to help reinforce the transmission of the reduction in bank rate to the real economy, and they have released the counter-cyclical buffer to further support the ability of banks to supply credit. The government's response will use fiscal action to support public services, households, and businesses. Together, we are taking action that is coordinated, coherent, and comprehensive. And let me now set out our three-point plan. First, whatever extra resources our NHS needs to cope with coronavirus, it will get. So whether it's research for a vaccine, recruiting thousands of returning staff, or supporting our brilliant doctors and nurses, whether it's millions of pounds or billions of pounds, whatever it needs, whatever it costs, we stand behind our NHS. Second, during this immediate crisis, if people fall ill or can't work, we must support their finances. We'll make sure that our safety net remains strong enough to fall back on. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has already announced that statutory sick pay will be paid from day 1 rather than day 4. Today, with the assistance of my right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, we can go further. Statutory sick pay will also be available for all those who are advised to self-isolate even if they haven't yet presented with symptoms. And rather than having to go to the doctors, you will soon be able to obtain a sick note by contacting 111. But of course, not everyone is eligible for statutory sick pay. There are millions of people working hard who are self-employed or in the gig economy. They will need our help too. So to support them during this period, we will make it quicker and easier to access benefits. Those on contributory employment and support allowance will be able to claim from day 1 instead of day 8. And to make sure that time spent off work due to sickness is reflected in your benefits, I'm also temporarily removing the minimum income floor in universal credit. And I'm relaxing the requirement for anyone to physically attend a job centre. Everything can be done by phone or online. Taken together, these measures on ESA and universal credit provide a boost of almost £500 million to our welfare system. And to further support our people, I am also creating a £500 million hardship fund distributed to local authorities who will be able to use that fund to directly support vulnerable people in their local area. So in total, that's a £1 billion commitment to support the financial security of our people. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the best way to support people is to protect their jobs. And we do that by supporting our businesses, the third part of our plan. The measures I've announced today on statutory sick pay are crucial to support those who need to take time off work. But that cost would be borne by business. And if we expect 20% of the workforce to be unable to work at any one time, the cumulative cost would hit our small and medium-sized businesses hard. So, in recognition of these exceptional circumstances, today I am taking a significant step. For businesses with fewer than 250 employees, I have decided that the cost of providing statutory sick pay to any employee off work due to coronavirus will, for up to 14 days, be refunded by the government in full. That could provide over £2 billion for up to 2 million businesses. This will significantly ease the burden on businesses, but we can do more. I have asked HMRC to scale up the time to pay service, allowing businesses and the self-employed to defer tax payments over an agreed period of time. Starting today, there will be a dedicated helpline with 2,000 staff standing ready to help. Now, although time to pay is important, it will still be the case that some good, well-run businesses will face problems with their cash flow. They may struggle to pay people's salaries, pay their bills, or buy new stock. They will need loans to get through this period. So today, I'm announcing a new temporary coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. Banks will offer loans of up to £1.2 million to support small and medium-sized businesses. The government will offer a generous guarantee on those loans, covering up to 80% of losses with no fees so that banks can lend with confidence. This will unlock up to £1 billion of attractive working capital loans to support small businesses with more as needed. Taken together, I expect the combination of these measures to protect the vast majority of businesses through the worst of the crisis. But I have two other measures that will use the tax system to support businesses through this. Our manifesto promised that for shops, cinemas, restaurants and music venues with a rateable value of less than £51,000, we would increase their business rates retail discount to 50%. Today, I can go further and take the exceptional step for this coming year of abolishing their business rates altogether. But there are tens of thousands of other businesses in the leisure and hospitality sectors currently not covered by this policy. Museums, art galleries and theatres, caravan parks and gyms, small hotels and B&Bs, sports clubs, nightclubs, clubhouses, guest houses, they would not benefit from today's measure, but they could be some of the hardest hit. So for this year, I have decided to extend the 100% retail discount to them as well. That means any eligible retail, leisure or hospitality business with a rateable value below £51,000 will, over the next financial year, pay no business rates whatsoever. That is a tax cut worth £1 billion, saving each business up to £25,000. And it means, over the next 12 months, nearly half of all business properties in England will not pay a penny of business rates. I'm also launching today a fundamental review to be concluded at the autumn budget into the long-term future of business rates. But even with the temporary extension of the retail discount to the leisure and hospitality sectors, many of our smallest businesses already pay no business rates, so would not benefit from this policy. So to support them to manage their fixed costs, I'm going to go a step further. I am providing to any business currently eligible for the small business rates relief a £3,000 cash grant per business. This is a £2 billion cash injection direct to 700,000 of our smallest businesses. Let me summarise for the House the fiscal impact of our immediate response to coronavirus. Taken together, the extraordinary measures I have set out today represent £7 billion to support the self-employed, businesses and vulnerable people. To support the NHS and other public services, I am also setting aside today a £5 billion emergency response fund, and I will go further if necessary. Those measures are on top of plans I will set out later in this budget, which provide an additional fiscal loosening of £18 billion to support the economy this year. That means I am announcing today, in total, a £30 billion fiscal stimulus to support British people, British jobs, and British businesses through this moment. And of course, if further action is needed as the situation evolves, I hope the whole House knows I will not hesitate to act. I believe this represents one of the most comprehensive economic responses of any government anywhere in the world to date. The Governor of the Bank of England and I are in close contact with our counterparts around the world in the G7 and the G20. And to support the global response, I'm also making new funding of £150 million available for the IMF's relief efforts. Madam Deputy Speaker, coronavirus will have a significant impact on our economy, but it will be temporary. I will do whatever it takes to get our nation through it. I'm acting today with a multi-billion pound commitment. More money for our NHS, more generous sick pay, faster access to benefits if you're self-employed, extra local support for the most vulnerable, tax cuts, loans and grants for businesses to protect people's jobs. Comprehensive action, and if more is needed, I will take it. And I know all members of this House will want to give this plan their full support. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I turn to the economic forecast, I hope the House will join me in thanking the Office for Budget Responsibility and Robert Choate in particular. After 10 years, this is his last budget in charge. He's led the OBR with dedication and integrity and established that institution as one that is respected around the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now turn to the growth forecasts. Since the OBR closed their forecast, it has become clear that the spread of coronavirus will have a significant impact on our economy in the coming quarters. But given that the nature of the shock is temporary, I still want to set out for the House the OBR's judgment on the economy over the medium term. Even before coronavirus hit, we were facing a slowing world economy. There has been, across developed economies, including here in the UK, a decade-long slowdown in productivity. This, combined with the political uncertainty of the last 3 years, which affected business investment in particular, has led the OBR to downgrade our productivity over the forecast period and to slightly reduce GDP growth compared to the March 2019 forecast. But while the world may slow down, we will act here with a response that is brave and bold, taking decisions now for our future prosperity. We are investing in world-class infrastructure and to lead the world in the industries and technologies of the future. The central judgment I am making today is to fund an additional £175 billion over the next 5 years for our future prosperity. The OBR have said that as a direct result of the plans that I'm announcing, growth over the next 2 years will be 0.5 percentage point higher than it otherwise would have been. For the benefit of the House, the GDP forecast, without fully accounting for the impact of coronavirus, would have led to growth of 1.1% in 2020, 1.8% in 2021, then 1.5%, 1.3%, and 1.4% in the following years. And today, the OBR have made an estimate they've never made before. They have said, in their words, that today's large planned increase in public investment should boost potential output too. If future governments have the same determination to continue our approach, the UK's long-term productivity will increase by 2.5%. The OBR have confidence in the long-term future of our economy, and so do I. Madam Deputy Speaker, more investment and higher growth mean more jobs and higher wages. We already have more people working in our economy than ever before. Women's employment is at a record high, and since 2010, full-time weekly wages have grown faster in every region and nation of the UK than they have in London. The OBR expect 500,000 people more will be in work by 2025. Wages are expected to grow in real terms in every year of the forecast period. The story of this government has been the story of a national jobs miracle. And Madam Deputy Speaker, given the last few weeks I've had, I'm all in favour of jobs miracles. On inflation, the OBR forecasts 1.4% this year, increasing to 1.8% next year, and then for the rest of the forecast period, remaining on or around target. And I'm sure the whole House will join me in taking the opportunity to thank Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, for his 7 years of dedicated public service. We congratulate him on his new role as Finance Advisor for COP26 and welcome his successor, Andrew Bailey, who takes up his post on Monday. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now turn to the fiscal forecasts. The economic impacts of coronavirus remind us of the importance of fiscal responsibility. Our public finances are strong, with the deficit down from 10% in 2010 to less than 2% last year. Our economy is well prepared for the future, and it's well prepared because of 10 years of Conservative-led government and Conservative chancellors. And I, too, will always act responsibly with the nation's finances. But it is important that we update our fiscal framework to remain at the leading edge of international best practice. Our economic security depends on maintaining the following principles: low and stable inflation delivering price stability, fiscal sustainability, and independent, effective institutions like the Bank of England and the OBR. These features of our framework will always be protected. But there is a live global debate about what our low interest rate environment means for fiscal strategy, about the case for fiscal policy to play a more active role in stabilising the economy, and about the best ways to measure productivity-enhancing investment in the economy, such as human capital or measuring value on the public balance sheet. So I want to take time to consider these questions over the coming months, so that our fiscal framework allows us to make the right long-term decisions for our economic security and prosperity. I will review the fiscal framework, consulting widely with a range of experts, and will report back in the autumn if I conclude that any changes are necessary. But at the same time, credibility comes as much from what we do as what we say. We were elected on a manifesto that promised to meet a specific set of fiscal rules. Today's budget is about delivering our promises. And that's why, despite the speculation, today's budget is delivered not just within the fiscal rules in our manifesto, but with room to spare. And I'm setting the amount the government will spend for the rest of this Parliament within those rules as well. Today, the OBR report a current budget surplus in every one of the next 5 years. And in the target year of 22-23, we have fiscal space of nearly £12 billion. The OBR forecasts that borrowing will increase slightly from 2.1% of GDP in 1920 to 2.4% in 2021, 2.8% in 21-22. It then falls to 2.5%, 2.4%, and 2.2% in the following years. And the OBR forecasts that headline debt will be lower at the end of the Parliament than it is today, falling from 79.5% this year to 75.2% in 24-25. I'm sure the House will understand that given how urgently we've developed our economic response to the coronavirus, that package of measures have not yet been captured in the fiscal forecast, and nor have the fiscal impacts of the bank's actions. But the House will also note that the target year for our current budget fiscal rule is not until 22-23. So even within our current framework, I have the flexibility to act as required over the next 2 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, as we enter a period of challenge, we start from a position of strength. The economy growing, more jobs, higher wages, stable inflation, sound public finances. We promise to manage our economies responsibly. We're getting it done. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget responds at scale to the immediate threat of coronavirus, and it reports on an economy whose foundations are strong. It is a budget that provides for security today, but let me now outline our plan for prosperity tomorrow. This is the first budget of a new decade, the first in almost 50 years outside the European Union, and the first of this new government. At the election, we said we needed to be one nation. While talent is evenly spread, opportunity is not, and we need to fix that. This is a budget that will deliver on our promises to the British people, and it is the budget of a government that gets things done. We promised to get Brexit done, and we got it done. We promised to let hard-working families keep more of what they earn. This budget gets it done. We promised to back businesses to innovate, invest and trade. This budget gets it done. We promised to invest in science and research. This budget gets it done. We promised to deliver green growth and protect our environment. This budget gets it done. We promised to level up with new roads, railways, broadband and homes. This budget gets it done. And yes, we promised record funding for our NHS and public services. This budget gets it done. This government delivers its promises and gets things done. Madam Deputy Speaker, our plan for prosperity starts immediately by putting more money in people's pockets. It was a Conservative government that in 2016 introduced the national living wage, giving Britain's lowest paid workers the biggest pay rise in 20 years. And in just 3 weeks' time, around 2 million workers will see their wage rise again by 6.2%. For a full-time worker, that's a pay rise of almost £1,000. That is the biggest cash increase ever. But we've promised to go further. Today, we're publishing a new remit for the Independent Low Pay Commission. They now have a formal target that as long as economic conditions allow, by 2024, the national living wage will reach 2/3 of median earnings. On current forecasts, that means a living wage of over £10.50 an hour. We promised to end low pay. We're getting it done. And as people earn more, we'll also cut taxes on their wages. I am increasing in just 4 weeks' time the national insurance threshold from £8,632 to £9,500. That's a tax cut for 31 million people, saving a typical employee over £100. And taken together, our changes to the national living wage, income tax, and now national insurance mean that someone working full-time on the minimum wage will be more than £5,200 better off than in 2010. Yeah. The Conservatives, the real Workers' Party. I can also confirm, now that we've left the EU, that I will abolish the tampon tax. From January next year, there will be no VAT whatsoever on women's sanitary products. And I congratulate all members and right honourable members who campaigned for this, including the former member for Dewsbury who led the charge. Now let me turn to duties. Scotch whisky is a crucial industry and our largest food and drink export. My Scottish Conservative colleagues, including my honourable friend, the member for Moray, have highlighted to me the impact that the recent US tariffs are having. We will continue to lobby the US government to remove these harmful tariffs. But in the meantime, I'm announcing today £1 million of support to promote Scottish food and drink overseas and £10 million of new R&D funding to help distilleries go green. And to further support the industry, I can also announce that this year, the planned increase in spirits duty will be cancelled. Madam Deputy Speaker, pubs are at the centre of community life. Madam Deputy Speaker, pubs are at the centre of community life, but too many have closed over the past decade. We're already promised to introduce a business rates pubs discount of £1,000 for small pubs. But I've heard calls from many honourable and right honourable members, including my honourable friend, the member for Dudley South, that we need to do more, especially given the possible impact of coronavirus on our pubs. So today, I can announce that exceptionally for this year, the business rate discount for pubs will not be £1,000, it will be £5,000. And I'm also pleased to announce that the planned rise in beer duty will also be cancelled. And because of decisions I've taken elsewhere in this budget, I am also freezing duties for cider and wine drinkers as well. For only the second time in almost 20 years, that's every single one of our alcohol duties frozen. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have heard representations that after 9 years of being frozen, at a cost of £110 billion to the taxpayer, we can no longer afford to freeze fuel duty. I'm certainly mindful of the fiscal cost and the environmental impacts, but I'm taking considerable steps in this budget to incentivise cleaner forms of transportation, and many people still rely on their cars. So I'm pleased to announce today that for another year, fuel duty will remain frozen. Compared to 2010 plans, that's a saving of £1,200. Madam Deputy Speaker, wages up, national insurance cut, the tampon tax abolished, spirits duty frozen, beer duty frozen, wine and cider duty frozen, fuel duty frozen. We promised to cut taxes and the cost of living, and we got it done. Yeah! Madam Deputy Speaker, as Conservatives, we know that to put more money in people's pockets, we need a thriving private sector. That is what drives growth. That is what creates jobs. That is what lifts living standards. So the second part of our plan for prosperity is to unleash the power of business. Businesses need support to start up, grow and export. So today I provide £130 million of new funding to extend start-up loans, £200 million for the British Business Bank to invest in scale-ups, another £200 million for life sciences, more money for growth hubs, 21 cities with British Library business support, £5 billion of new export loans for business, and dedicated trade envoys representing the North, the Midlands, Wales and the West of England in our embassies around the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, businesses also need a fair tax system. We were elected on a manifesto that promised to review and reform entrepreneurs' relief. I've now completed that review, and here's what we're going to do. Entrepreneurs' relief is expensive at a cost of over £2 billion per year, ineffective, with less than 1 in 10 claimants saying the relief was an incentive to set up their business, and unfair, with nearly 3/4 of the cost going to just 5,000 individuals. Just because it's called Entrepreneurs' Relief doesn't mean that it's entrepreneurs who mainly benefit. For all these reasons, I've heard representations that I should completely abolish it. The Institute of Fiscal Studies have criticised it. The Resolution Foundation called it the UK's worst tax break. And I'm sympathetic to that argument. But at the same time, we shouldn't discourage those genuine entrepreneurs who do rely on the relief. We need more risk-taking and creativity in this country, not less. So I have decided not to fully abolish Entrepreneurs' Relief today. Instead, I will do what the Federation of Small Businesses called a sensible reform and reduce the lifetime limit from £10 million to £1 million. 80% of small business owners are unaffected by today's changes. Those reforms save £6 billion over the next 5 years, and I'm giving almost all of that money straight back to business through 3 additional measures. The research and development expenditure credit will be increased from 12 to 13%, a tax cut worth £2,400 on a typical R&D claim. The structures and buildings allowance will be increased from 2% to 3%, giving an extra £100,000 of relief if you're investing in a building worth £10 million. And to cut taxes on employment, I will deliver our promise to increase the employment allowance by 1/3 to £4,000. That's a tax cut this April for nearly 500,000 small businesses. Another step towards a dynamic, low-tax economy we want to see. Madam Deputy Speaker, we promised to cut taxes on business. We're getting it done. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, to help our businesses lead the next generation of high-productivity industries, we also need to invest now in the technologies of the future. We are a country of Newton, Hodgkin, and Turing. Ours is a history filled with ideas, invention, and discovery, and is truly a national history. The first steam railway ran between Stockton and Darlington. The first television was invented by a Scot. A Welshman invented the first hydrogen fuel cell, and Jocelyn Bell Burnell, born in Northern Ireland, discovered the first radio pulsars. To compete and succeed over the next decade and beyond, we need to recapture that spirit. So the third part of our plan for prosperity is to invest in ideas. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we made a promise to double investment in research and development to £18 billion. I will not be doing this today. Instead, I will increase investment in R&D to £22 billion a year. That is the fastest and largest increase in R&D spend ever. As a percentage of GDP, it will be the highest in nearly 40 years, higher than the US, China, France, and Japan, and a major step towards our target of increasing public and private investment in R&D to 2.4% of GDP. And we won't wait to get started. Next year, funding will grow by 15%, the fastest year-on-year growth on record. Detailed allocations of our investment in ideas will be set out at the spending review, but I can make some announcements today. I'm investing £1.4 billion in our world-leading Science Institute at Weybridge, where, as we speak, they're working to analyse samples of coronavirus. To secure our leadership in the technologies of the future, I'm investing over £900 million in nuclear fusion, space, and electric vehicles. And as we invest in ideas, we're also changing the way we fund science in this country. I can confirm that we will invest at least £800 million in a new Blue Skies funding agency here in the UK, modelled on the extraordinary ARPA in the US. And as we invest in ideas, we're also changing where we fund science in this country. Today, half of R&D funding goes to London, the east and the southeast of England. So we're investing £400 million of new funding into high-quality research, with much of that incremental funding going to our brilliant universities around this country. We promise to make this country one of the scientific research centres of the world. We're getting it done. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, there can be no lasting prosperity for our people if we do not protect our planet. So the fourth part of our plan for prosperity is to create the high-skill, high-wage, low-carbon jobs of the future. To level up with completely new industries in our regions and nations, to raise our productivity and lift our quality of life even as we cut our emissions. The Treasury's Net Zero review will set out the government's strategic choices ahead of COP26 later this year. Today's budget takes the first steps. First, we will increase taxes on pollution. Electricity is now a cleaner energy form than gas, but our climate change levy, paid by companies, taxes electricity at a higher rate. So as another step towards equalising the rates and encouraging energy efficiency, from April 2022, I'm freezing the levy on electricity and raising it on gas. I will support the most energy-intensive industries to transition to net zero by extending the Climate Change Agreement Scheme for a further 2 years. To tackle the scourge of plastic waste, we will deliver our manifesto promise to introduce a new plastic packaging tax. From April 2022, we will charge manufacturers and importers £200 per tonne on packaging made of less than 30% recycled plastic. That will increase the use of recycled plastic in packaging by 40%, equal to carbon savings of nearly 200,000 tonnes. Let me now turn to red diesel. The red diesel scheme allows selected users to pay duty of just over 11 pence per litre for diesel, compared to almost 58 pence per litre for everyone else. But the sectors using red diesel are some of the biggest contributors to our air quality problem, emitting nearly 10% of the noxious gases polluting the air of our cities like London. This is a tax relief on nearly 14 million tonnes of carbon dioxide every year, the same as the entire population of London and Greater Manchester taking a return flight to New York. It's been a £2.4 billion tax break for pollution that's also hindered the development of cleaner alternatives. So I will abolish the tax relief for most sectors. That's the right thing to do, but I recognise it will be a big change for some industries. So firstly, this change will not take effect for 2 years, giving businesses time to prepare. Secondly, I have heard the concerns about agriculture, particularly from the NFU rural colleagues, and indeed my right honourable friend, the member for Sherwood. So I have decided that agriculture will retain the relief. I'll also keep the relief for rail, for domestic heating, and there will be no impact on fishing. We'll consult over the summer with other sectors. And thirdly, to help develop cleaner alternatives to red diesel and other fossil fuels, we will more than double R&D investment in the Energy Innovation Programme to £1 billion. Now, as well as taxing pollution, we will invest and cut taxes on clean transport. We're introducing a comprehensive package of tax and spend reforms to make it cheaper to buy zero or low-emission cars, vans, motorbikes and taxis. We're investing £300 million in tackling nitrogen dioxide emissions in towns and cities across England. And we're investing £500 million to support the rollout of new rapid charging hubs so that drivers are never more than 30 miles away from being able to charge up their car. Taken together, this budget invests £1 billion in green transport solutions. Madam Deputy Speaker, many members around this House will have seen the devastating impact of the recent floods on homes and businesses in their own constituencies. And particularly the Honourable Member for Barnsley East, my honourable friends, the members for Calder Valley and Telford, my right honourable friend, the member for Ludlow. So I can announce today that I'm making £120 million available immediately to repair all damages, all defences damaged in the winter floods. To support those areas that have been repeatedly flooded, I am also providing £200 million of funding directly to local communities to build their flood resilience. And to protect people and over 300,000 properties, I'm doubling our investment in flood defences over the next 6 years to £5.2 billion. Madam Deputy Speaker, We're also supporting natural habitats like woodlands and peat bogs. I can confirm today that to protect, restore and expand these wonderful habitats and capture carbon, we will provide £640 million for a new Nature for Climate fund. Over the next 5 years, we will plant around 30,000 hectares of trees. That's a forest larger than Birmingham, and restore 35,000 hectares of peatland. This government intends to be the first in history to leave our natural environment in a better state than we found it. Madam Deputy Speaker, I can make one further announcement on green growth. Carbon capture and storage is precisely the kind of exciting technology where Britain can lead the world over the next decade. I can announce today that we will invest at least £800 million to establish 2 or more new carbon capture storage clusters by 2030. Once up and running, these clusters will store millions of tons of carbon dioxide that otherwise would have been released into the atmosphere. The new clusters will create up to 6,000 high-skill, high-wage, low-carbon jobs in areas like Teesside, Humberside, Merseyside or St Fergus in Scotland. It's levelling up in action. Madam Deputy Speaker, green jobs, better flood defences, cheaper electric vehicles, innovative new technologies. We promise to protect our environment. We're getting it done. Madam Deputy Speaker, we as a party know that talent is evenly spread in our country, but opportunity is not, and we have to put that right. We need to build the infrastructure that will lay the foundations for a new century of prosperity. We need to grab the opportunity to upgrade, to improve, to enhance, to level up. That starts today with the next part of our plan as we get Britain building. Madam Deputy Speaker, over the next 5 years, we will invest more than £600 billion in our future prosperity. Public net investment will, in real terms, be the highest it's been since 1955. Take the average amount we've invested over the last 40 years in real terms, we're tripling it. Capital budgets in 24-25 alone will reach over £110 billion. I will set out the detailed capital allocations at the spending review, but I'm taking 3 major steps today. First, we're going to change the whole mindset of government to make sure economic decision-making reflects the economic geography of the country. We're reviewing the Treasury's Green Book. We'll have Treasury offices in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And I can announce today that we're also opening a new economic campus in the north with over 750 staff from the Treasury, the Departments for Business, Local Government and Trade. And we won't stop there. Our ultimate ambition is to move 22,000 civil servants outside central London. Second, because of this changed mindset, we will invest more in our nation's cities and towns. Today's budget provides an extra £640 million for the Scottish Government, £360 million for the Welsh Government and £210 million for the Northern Ireland Executive. I'm announcing £242 million of funding for new city and growth deals, taking our investment in these deals to more than £2.7 billion. We've agreed today a new devolution deal in West Yorkshire with a directly elected mayor for the region. And to make sure that it isn't just Londoners who benefit from the kind of long-term transport deal that helped TfL, I'm announcing today that the new West Yorkshire mayor will, along with the 7 other Metro mayors, get new London-style funding settlements worth £4.2 billion. These settlements are in addition to the Transforming Cities Fund, which will invest over £1 billion in local transport in 12 further cities, including Stoke, Preston, Derby, Nottingham and Southampton. Third, we're going to build broadband, railway, roads. If the country needs it, we will build it. Today's budget provides £5 billion to get gigabit-capable broadband into the hardest-reached places, and £510 million of new investment into the shared rural phone network. which means that in the next 5 years, 4G coverage will reach 95% of our country. And let me thank my right honourable friend, the Culture Secretary, who will get this done. We're also going to build better railways, Madam Deputy Speaker, with spades going into the ground on HS2, our commitment to fund Manchester Leeds leg of Northern Powerhouse Rail, funding today for a new station at Cambridge South and the Midlands Rail Hub, Darlington Station moving to the next stage of development and approval, and funding to make dozen train stations more accessible. And there's more money for our roads too. Today, I'm announcing the biggest ever investment in strategic roads and motorway, over £27 billion of tarmac. That will pay for work on over 20 connections to ports and airports, over 100 junctions, and over 4,000 miles of road. I'm also announcing new investment in local roads alongside a new £2.5 billion pothole fund. That's £500 million every single year, enough to fill by the end of this Parliament 50 million potholes. The details of all these road schemes that I'm funding will be published later today, and I thank my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, for all his efforts. Our ambition is truly national. The A417 in the southwest, the A428 in the east, the A46 in the Midlands, unclogging Manchester's arteries, freeing the traffic north of Newcastle, and something my North and Mid Wales colleagues will be particularly pleased to hear: we're protecting beautiful villages in the Welsh borders as we finally build the Pant-Llanelli-Monach bypass. Well done. We promised to get Britain moving, and we're getting it done. There's one more road I'd like to mention. It's one of our most important regional arteries. It is one of those totemic projects symbolising delay and obstruction. Governments have been trying to fix it since the 1980s. Every year, millions of cars crawl along it in traffic, ruining the backdrop to one of our most important historic landmarks. So to the many honourable and right honourable members who have campaigned for this moment, I say this: the A303, this government's going to get it done. Madam Deputy Speaker, today we've announced the biggest programme of public investment ever. £27 billion for strategic roads this Parliament, funding to fill 50 million potholes, new railways, new stations, £5 billion for broadband, a new mayor for West Yorkshire, investment in every region and every nation of our United Kingdom. We promised to get Britain building. This budget is getting it done. Madam Deputy Speaker, only by having a plan for prosperity will we grow the economy. Only by having a growing economy can we invest in our public services. And only by investing in our public services, the people's priority, can we send a clear message to those who rely on them. You are our priority. Our public services are one of the most important tools by which we, the government, can level up and spread opportunity, so that no matter who you are or where you were born, you will have every chance to succeed in our modern, dynamic economy. And that starts with education. We've already provided schools with a 3-year settlement worth over £7 billion by 2022. My right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, is taking forward our plans to increase per-pupil funding next year by an average of over 4%. Today, I'm providing every region in the country with funding for specialist 16 to 19 maths schools, £25,000 per year on average for each secondary school to invest in arts activities, £30 million a year to improve PE teaching, and £8 million for the Football Foundation scheme to build new pitches for around 300,000 people to play on. And to support families, I'm providing £2.5 million to fund research into how best to integrate family services, including family hubs championed by my honourable friend, the member for Congleton. Next, I'd like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to my predecessor and friend, the Right Honourable Member for Bromsgrove. One of the issues he is most passionate about is levelling up further education. At the spending round, he increased funding for 16 to 19 education by £400 million. Today, I can secure his legacy with £1.5 billion of new capital over 5 years to dramatically improve the condition of our entire FE College estate. Yeah. My predecessor wanted to level up further education. Saj, we're getting it done. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final education announcement. I've talked today about Britain being the country of scientists, inventors, and engineers. But we're also the country of Shakespeare, Austen, and Dahl. Our greatest export to the world is our language. Our greatest asset is the free exchange of ideas and debate. And our greatest responsibility is the education of our young people. A world-class education will help the next generation thrive, and nothing could be more fundamental to that than reading. And yet digital publications are subject to VAT. That can't be right. So today, I am abolishing the reading tax. From the 1st of December, just in time for Christmas, books, newspapers, magazines, or academic journals, however they are read, will have no VAT charge whatsoever. There will be no VAT on historical fiction by Hilary Mantel, manuals or textbooks like Gray's Anatomy, or indeed works of fantasy like John MacDonald's Economics for the Many. The irony is, it sold so few, it's literally his own little red book. Madam Deputy Speaker, our second priority is to make sure people have affordable and safe housing. Today, I can make good our promise to extend the Affordable Homes programme with a new multi-year settlement of £12 billion. This will be the largest cash investment in affordable housing in a decade. To support local authorities to invest in their communities, I'm cutting interest rates on lending for social housing by 1 percentage point, making available more than £1 billion of discounted loans for local infrastructure and consulting on the future of the Public Works Loan Board. I'm confirming nearly £1.1 billion of allocations from the Housing Infrastructure Fund to build nearly 70,000 homes in areas of high demand across our country. A new £400 million fund for ambitious mayors like Andy Street in the West Midlands to build on brownfield sites. And tomorrow, my right honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, will set out for the House comprehensive reforms to bring our planning system into the 21st century. But the housing challenge is most acutely felt by those with no home at all. So today, I'm confirming £650 million of funding to help rough sleepers into permanent accommodation. That will buy up to 6,000 new places for people to live, enable a step change in support services, and help us meet our promise to end rough sleeping in this Parliament. And to fund those rough sleeping measures, I'm confirming today that our manifesto promise to introduce a new stamp duty surcharge for non-UK residents will be introduced at a rate of 2% from April 2021. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one further measure to announce on housing. 2.5 years on, we're still grappling with the tragic legacy of Grenfell. Last year, we allocated £600 million to remove unsafe aluminium composite material, or ACM, from high-rise residential buildings. Today, I go further. Expert advice is clear that new public funding must concentrate on removing unsafe materials from high-rise residential buildings. So today, I am creating a new building safety fund worth £1 billion. That is what the experts have called for. That is what the Select Committee has called for. That is even what the opposition have called for. That new fund will go beyond dealing with ACM to make sure that all unsafe combustible cladding will be removed from every private and social residential building above 18 metres high. And my right honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, will spearhead our efforts to make sure developers and building owners do their fair share as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is no more cherished public service than our NHS. Whatever resources the NHS needs to deal with coronavirus, it will get. We all benefit from a thriving health service, so it is right that we ask everyone to contribute. Business benefits from our NHS. So as promised in our manifesto, the corporation tax rate will not be cut this year, but will remain at 19%, still the lowest rate in the G20. Migrants benefit from our NHS, and we all want them to do so. But it's right that what people get out, they also put in. There is a surcharge already, but it doesn't properly reflect the benefits that people receive. So as we promised in our manifesto, we are increasing the immigration health surcharge to £624 with a discounted rate for children. To raise further funds for the NHS, I'm announcing a package of measures today to clamp down on aggressive tax avoidance, evasion and non-compliance, including extra funding for HMRC to secure £4.4 billion of additional revenue. And those extra contributions allow me to take 3 further steps to support our health services. First, mental health support can be critical for many people, and particularly for our veterans. Thanks to the campaigning from my honourable friend, the member for Wolverhampton South West, and my right honourable friend, the member for Harwich and North Essex, I will be supporting veterans with mental health needs with a £10 million donation to the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. And I'm also confirming today that to encourage employers to provide veterans with job opportunities, will introduce a new national insurance relief. Second, I've listened to concerns from all sides of this House that the pensions tax system is preventing doctors from taking on more hours. To significantly reduce the number of people that the tapered annual allowance affects, I am increasing both taper thresholds by £90,000, removing anyone with income below £200,000. Based on their vital work for the NHS, that will take around 98% of consultants and 96% of GPs out of the taper altogether. At the same time, I'm reducing the minimum annual allowance to £4,000, which will only impact those with incomes above £300,000. This is a £2 billion commitment that supports our hard-working doctors. Let me turn now to the overall funding settlement for the NHS. We've already provided the NHS with a record funding increase, £34 billion over 5 years, the biggest cash increase in public services since the Second World War. Today, I can go further. I can announce over £6 billion of new funding in this Parliament to support the NHS. That new money will deliver 50,000 more nurses, 50 million more GP surgery appointments, and work starting on 40 new hospitals. You heard that right, 40 new hospitals. We promised to back the NHS, and this budget gets it done. I have one last point to make about public services. We have now left the EU. We promised to get Brexit done, and we got it done. We promised to regain control of the money we send to Brussels, and for the first time ever, today's OBR forecast shows that the billions of pounds we would have sent to the EU can now be spent on our priorities. Today, I'm launching the next spending review to conclude in July, setting out detailed spending plans for the Parliament. Let me set out for the House our new totals for public spending on public services. The OBR have said that today's budget will be the largest sustained fiscal boost for nearly 30 years. Next year, day-to-day departmental spending will grow at the fastest rate in 15 years. Over the spending review period, it's set to grow at the fastest rate since 2004, an average growth rate in real terms of 2.8%, twice as fast as the economy. That means that by the end of this Parliament, day-to-day spending on public services will be £100 billion higher in cash terms than it is today. More police, safer streets, more nurses, better healthcare, more teachers, better education. Madam Deputy Speaker, the House now knows what the electorate already knows. The Conservatives are the party of public services. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are at the beginning of a new era in this country. We have the freedom and the resources to decide our own future, a future where we unleash the energy, inventiveness and creativity of all the British people, and a future where we look outwards and are confident on the world stage. That starts right now with our world-leading response to the coronavirus. This is a budget delivered in challenging times. We will rise to this moment. We will get through this together. This budget delivers security today, but it also lays the foundations for prosperity tomorrow. This is just the start. Over the next few months, we'll tackle the big issues head on, from our national infrastructure strategy to social care and further devolution. This is the budget of a government that gets things done. Creating jobs, cutting taxes, keeping the cost of living low, investing in our NHS, investing in our public services, investing in ideas, backing business, protecting our environment, building roads, building railways, building colleges, building houses, building our union. A budget that delivers on our promises, a people's budget from a people's government, and I commend it to this House.
So there you have it, the Chancellor's first budget, the first budget of 2020 and one dominated by the coronavirus crisis. Rishi Sunak announcing a £30 billion package to help the economy through this year. In just a moment, we'll hear from the outgoing leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, who gets to react to that speech. Let's, though, first go to our editors. Allegra, a budget of two halves, you thought?
Absolutely. That first one was sombre, an emergency budget. And then you could hear the mood shift in the chamber as he went into classic Tory tub-thumping, please the backbenchers mode. And it was a very, very striking shift for me. Joel will talk to viewers in a second about this, about the numbers. 30 billion. I mean, if you look at the stimulus package during the crash, 07, 08, it was 12 billion. It's 30 billion in 09, 010. So the magnitude of the money they're injecting into the economy makes it clear they are prepared for as big a hit as that was. Perhaps they don't think that we will end up using it in the end, but that the money is there. So make no mistake, they are taking this as seriously as possible. But otherwise, I thought it actually sounded quite like a Labour budget. I felt some of the, I mean, just now, we just had him saying, the OBR has told him it's the largest sustained increase in spending in 30 years, and it's a good thing. The previous Conservative chancellors, George Osborne and others, stood up and spoke about investment like it was a bad thing. The mood was very, very different, and it would have been an emphasis on cuts all the way through, whereas we heard an emphasis on spending all the way through.
Joel, your initial thoughts on whether the package he's announced is enough to get us through this particular period we're in now with the virus?
Well, the package he announced, Nina, came so late in the day that large chunks of it couldn't actually be included in the OBR forecast. I mean, the headlines are compelling. It is extraordinary. And I think, some people might feel this.
Joel, I'm going to interrupt you there because Jeremy Corbyn is about to react to the Chancellor's budget.
The coronavirus outbreak is an emergency. And so I want to make it clear that we have to work together, all of us, to meet this head on and to overcome it. But we'll only overcome this virus because of the dedication of our NHS staff, carers and public servants. The steps the government has announced today to head off the economic impact of the coronavirus are obviously welcome, but I have some points I wish to raise. We have to be straight with people. It is going to be much tougher because of the last 10 years of deeply damaging and counterproductive cuts to all of our essential public services. We're going into this crisis with our public services on their knees. And as today's figures confirm, with a fundamentally weak economy, which is now flatlining, with zero growth even before the impact of coronavirus. Today's budget was billed as a turning point, a chance to deliver, in particular on the promises made to working-class communities during the general election. But it doesn't come close. The government's boast of the biggest investment
OK,
since
let's
the 1950s
leave Jeremy Corbyn's thoughts on that.
It's in fact only the biggest since they began their slash-and-burn assault on our services, economic infrastructure and living standards in 2010. And having ruthlessly forced down the living standards and life chances of millions of our people for a decade, the talk of levelling up is a cruel joke. The reality is that this is a budget which has an admission of failure, an admission that austerity has been a failed experiment. It didn't solve our economic problems, but made them worse, that held back our own recovery and failed even in its own terms. And today's measures go nowhere near reversing the damage that has been done to our country. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will wish the honourable member for Mid-Bedfordshire well. Many people are understandably very worried about the impact of coronavirus on their own lives. The government needs to be very clear what it is announcing, and there are still questions to be answered about the government's response. What coverage is there for people on 0 hours contracts or those without a contract of employment beyond reforms to benefits? Will statutory sick pay adjustments announced today be available to all workers from day one? What support will be made available for low-paid workers who don't meet the lower earnings limit for statutory sick pay? Are there any plans to increase the level of statutory sick pay, which itself is actually scandalously low? Will people who are doing the right thing by self-isolating continue to be punished with a 5-week wait for universal credit payments? The benefit system can't be only to support for millions of workers not entitled to statutory sick pay. The crisis is exposing the vulnerabilities in our economy and our public services. When 17,000 National Health Service beds have been cut, leaving 94% of the remaining beds full, when 100,000 people were forced to wait more than 4 hours on trolleys in A&E departments in January, it's little wonder people worry that the extra money for the health service is too little, too late. We only have a quarter of the intensive care beds per person that Germany has. We don't have enough ventilators to deal with a mass outbreak or the people with the necessary trained skills to operate those ventilators. Across the National Health Service, there are at this moment 100,000 staff vacancies. And moreover, public health budgets have been slashed by £1 billion in recent years. What an irony. Public health is based on the principle that prevention is better than cure. But this government is providing money only after a serious outbreak is underway. We know that the most vulnerable people to coronavirus are older people. That is when we need a strong social care system. But social care is in crisis. There's an £8 billion funding gap since 2010. Instead of the government presenting a social care plan, which the part-time Prime Minister told us was ready long ago, they're asking the rest of us to come up with ideas. Underpaid care workers, a quarter of them, on 0 hours contracts, travel from house to house to provide care to elderly and sick people. It's a model that could scarcely be better designed to encourage the spread of a virus. So it is vital that the government doesn't wait a few months but comes up now with answers to ensure that care workers do not lose out for staying away from work if they experience the symptoms. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor shows not some, a lot of brass neck when he boasts that measures to deal with coronavirus are only possible because of his party's management of the economy. Look outside. In the rest of the world, in the real world, we're still living through the slowest economic recovery in a century. Our economy is fundamentally weak. ONS figures out today show the economy is not growing. Growth was 0.0% in the 3 months to January. 0.0% in the 3 months to the end of January. The Prime Minister might find this funny. Those struggling don't. Future growth has been downgraded yet again, from 1.4% to 1.1% this year. And that is before coronavirus has been taken into account. We have stalling productivity, flatlining business investment, and wages of only just scraped past pre-crisis levels. None of this can be blamed on coronavirus, and it isn't all because of Brexit either. It's because they have failed on the economy. That failure has left us the most regionally unequal country in Europe. Investment spending per head in London is currently more than double that of the East Midlands. And now they talk about levelling up. But who pushed huge swathes of our country so low in the first place? It's Conservative governments that have starved the country of investment over the last 10 years, resulting in a £192 billion hole in infrastructure spending. What has that meant for people? It's meant bus services have been cut. There is patchy access to broadband. Homes and businesses ruined because of inadequate flood defences. The Chancellor expects plaudits for half filling the investment hole his party created in the first place. Amid a blizzard of hype, he's claiming today marks the biggest capital injection since the 1950s. But, Mr. Speaker, this is actually all smoke and mirrors. As a percentage of GDP, it only returns us to the levels we had before the Conservatives slashed investment so drastically in 2010. Given the challenge of the coronavirus crisis, we need a far-reaching reaction to strengthen and stabilise our economy and ensure we are in the strongest position possible to navigate the transition to new relationships with the EU and a post-Brexit economy and the trade deals that will enable that to happen. If the government truly wanted to level up after Brexit, there is only one thing they should be doing above all else: a green industrial revolution. They would have a plan to kickstart new green industries and create skilled jobs all across our country. The climate emergency threatens our very existence. It demands we mobilise our resources on a massive scale. The environmental measures announced by the Chancellor today get nowhere near that. The government has maintained the freeze on fuel duty without lowering bus and rail fares, showing complacency about the climate emergency. Young people especially will be dismayed at the lack of urgency to reduce our emissions. They rightly see this as the Conservatives once again putting the profits of big polluters and oil companies above people's safety and well-being. And when the Chancellor announced with such aplomb a huge investment in road building across the country, where is the environmental impact assessment being made of that policy, or the increased pollution that will come from increased car use and traffic across this country? Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget confirms that austerity has not worked, even in its own terms. We've had a decade of decline. Austerity has cost the UK economy almost £100 billion, according to the New Economics Foundation. But the true cost is incalculable. I want to give the House an example to bring that home. Errol Graham was an amateur footballer when he was young. By his mid-50s, suffering from mental health issues, he had become reclusive, unable to leave his flat in Nottingham, terrified of the world outside. He couldn't attend his fitness for work assessment, so, because of the government's harsh and very uncaring attitude, his benefits were cut off. With no income for food, he obviously began to go hungry. He wrote a desperate letter to his DWP assessor. "Judge me fairly," he wrote. "It's not nice living this way." Errol weighed 4.5 stone when the bailiffs found his body inside his flat. He had starved to death in this, the 5th richest country in the world. When the Chancellor talks about difficult decisions the government took in imposing austerity, is he thinking of decisions to deprive Errol of his income, or people like Errol who are going through such traumas in their life? And the worst thing is, austerity, all of this suffering, has been a political choice, not an economic necessity. The party opposite continues to make the absurd claim that austerity was needed because spending on schools, hospitals and public services by Labour somehow was the cause of the worldwide financial crash in 2008. A US Senate report into the root causes of the crash singled out two investment banks to blame: Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister turfed out one Chancellor who had previously worked at Deutsche Bank and replaced him with another one who worked at Goldman Sachs. Truly a government of the people. Now, Mr. Speaker, they want us to believe that austerity is over. But it's not true. According to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, it would take at least $54 billion of current spending this year, excluding health and social care, to get us back to 2010 levels. We've heard nothing even approaching that scale from the Chancellor today. Without it, the IFS says austerity is baked into our economy. And try telling local councils, which face a further $8 billion black hole over this Parliament, that austerity is over. Mr. Speaker, to truly end austerity and fund urgent action on the climate emergency and our public services, we need a fair taxation system. That means making the richest pay their share. But the government's changes to the national insurance threshold will actually mostly benefit higher earners, while those on lower incomes would be far better supported by boosting wages and real social security. The income of the poorest fifth of families has fallen by 7% in just 2 years. And as the Resolution Foundation has said, this has been driven by policy choices. How can it be right that 12 years after the bankers crashed the economy, the poorest 20% of the population are still being made to pay for it, while those at the top are being rewarded yet again? And today we learn they won't even scrap Entrepreneurs Relief, a huge subsidy mainly benefiting 5,000 people who make an average of £350,000 per year. I can only assume those who fund the Conservative Party have had a quiet word with the Chancellor and told him to back off. Creating a fair taxation system also means tackling tax avoidance and evasion. How can we have confidence in this Chancellor to clamp down on tax dodgers when he previously worked for hedge funds that used the Cayman Islands and had a very close business associate who engaged in a multi-million-pound tax avoidance scheme? And how can we have confidence when the government's big idea is apparently free ports, tax-free zones, to allow the super-rich to dodge taxes and take away workers' protections? Mr. Speaker, the last Chancellor resigned, saying that no self-respecting minister could accept being controlled by advisers in Number 10. The new Chancellor accepted that control and now he's presented a budget just 27 days after taking the job. So can I, through him and the chuntering Prime Minister, pass on our congratulations to Dominic Cummings on writing a budget so quickly. But what a letdown it's been. When I first responded to a budget, austerity was very much in the vogue, and our demands for investment and spending were dismissed. The terrain of public debate has shifted dramatically in just a few years. But there's a gaping chasm between the rhetoric of the Conservative Party have adopted and the reality of what they delivered. Because the Conservative Party, whatever they say, will never stand up for working class communities. They will always put the interests of their wealthy friends first. The reality of today's announcements will become clear, and the hard sell and the spin will fade away, and this budget will then be seen to be a lost opportunity, a failure of ambition and a bitter disappointment to all those people who had been promised so much. But from what we've heard today, they're actually going to see very, very little.
Order. Call the Chairman of the Treasury Select